This is PwC's vision for analytics and AI transformation, an end-to-end solution that can empower your business to extract more value from your data. Whether you're in the business of developing cutting-edge products or trying to help provide customers with next-level service or fishing, we can team with you, helping you harness your own sea of data and fueling your bottom line.
All good? Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I know it's after lunch and energy may not be as high as we're all digesting, but I hope you feel that you're part of a very engaged discussion, a very practical discussion. My name is Bret Greenstein. I'm a partner in PwC, focused specifically on data transformation, analytics, and AI, helping companies to reinvent themselves using data. It's what I love. It's my passion. You'll also see we have three honored guests here, three of our clients, Anoop from Okta, Ramnik from USAA, and Warren from Best Buy. And they're going to talk about their own personal journeys, their own challenges, and some of their own strategies and how they're attacking the same transformations that many of us are going through. I think everyone knows the role of the Chief Data Officer is new. It's like the hardest job ever, and primarily because we have to all collectively enable business transformation while modernizing the data environment, sunsetting legacy systems, making data accessible to everybody faster, and then ensuring compliance at all times, privacy, security, and everything else. It's just one of those jobs that didn't exist only a few years ago and is now the heart of digital transformation. So for everyone who's tackled this job, the fact that you guys were able to take some time away and come and share with us is incredible, because I know how hard the role is. And I think for all of us, we are either doing the transformation or helping others to do it. What we're going to do today is each of them will give an introduction, and then I'll go through some questions to kind of help draw out some of their experiences, some of their guidance and advice for all of us. And I'd encourage you to ask questions. Use the app, queue up your questions. We'll do Q&A at the end. And hopefully this is just a session of a lot of learning, a lot of questions, and a great dialogue. So with that, Anoop, one, thank you for joining us. And I'm hoping you can share a little bit more about your role and the journey that you're going on at Okta, and specifically the role of data at Okta.
Yeah. Thanks, Bret. And sorry for the after lunch slot, right? Even after lunch on the last day is probably not the best slot. We try to make it entertaining, right, Bret? So I lead the data and analytics team at Okta, and just as my background, I've been doing data and analytics for almost 30 years now. I started with the UN, with UNICEF, and I was measuring vaccination rates before measuring vaccination rates for school. This is vaccination rates for polio and humanitarian metrics. Over the past 10 years, I've helped companies like Okta, Workday, and VMware leverage data to drive growth and foster innovation. And at Okta, being a SaaS company and being the leading identity provider, data is absolutely key to understanding how to best support and serve our customers. For us, data is the lifeblood in the enterprise. So my role at Okta is to make sure that we use data throughout our customer journey and make sure that we help them throughout as they transition through the different phases with us.
So in that role, how is data evolving? Like, what has changed, especially in the last couple of years with the pandemic and change in the world? How has data evolved and affected your business?
Just in the first few months of the pandemic, the Okta Identity Cloud was used more than 12 billion times to connect to a website or an application. Right? Our multi-factor authentication service was used 3 times more during the same phase as the previous year. For us to understand that is absolutely key to better support our customers. Right? And the first phase of the pandemic, as all of you know, was to just get remote work working. The second phase was all about customer experience. Many of our customers were launching products and services online for the first time, right? So FedEx, which is a large customer of ours, Okta helped FedEx get 500,000 FedEx employees to get to work from home in a really rapid fashion. Seton Hall, how many of you have heard of Seton Hall? Seton Hall is a leading Catholic university. They had 3 days to move all their students, faculty, and classes online. And Okta was instrumental in doing that. So that experience of transitioning our customers from a office environment to a virtual environment and a hybrid environment, understanding the data of how our products are being used, how to support our customers is absolutely key.
Yeah. You have a unique perspective because of the data you work on to see the changing usage patterns in the world, or at least society. What are your predictions for, I hate to ask a prediction about a pandemic, but what's your prediction for how this will change? Will you see a continued growth in multi-factor authentication and remote work and hybrid and complexity, or have we kind of peaked and moving to something else?
So hybrid work is here to stay. Right? I mean, now that we've all tasted blood, right? In terms of not everybody needs to be in the office, not everybody needs to be at a certain location. Hybrid work is going to be the new norm. And we at Okta are planning for our growth in a hybrid work environment, especially, when you go look at, not just multi-factor authentication, but adaptive multi-factor authentication, depending on where you are in the globe. And how can you authenticate? You may not always have a service provider which can send you an OTP code on your phone. So how do you make sure there is a biometric capability for multi-factor authentication? And all this is empowered by the underlying data infrastructure and ecosystem.
Interesting. So given all that, you're obviously living in a B2B world. And what you do, there's a lot of, we all understand, I think, a different point of view on consumers, but how is data consumption and usage and patterns, and how do you serve those B2B customers that you think is different than what most of us think about in a consumer business?
Yeah, so we live in Okta, we've got workforce identity management, but we also have customer identity management. And customer identity management is the B2B, but B2B2C, that part of it, and the volumes of data, right? So let's assume you are an airline and you want to get your workforce to use your applications. That's when you use the Okta's workforce management. But then you have 5, 10, 15, 50 million loyalty members, and how do you get them to use that? And that's through your customer identity management platform. So what we did last year was we acquired Auth0, a company leading in customer identity and access management. And for us, the way we look at data for customer identity and access management is extremely unique in terms of we look at trends and patterns. I don't know how many of you, Okta every year publishes this report called Businesses at Work, which talks about trends of what applications are being used by organizations as they transition from in-office environment to a remote environment to a hybrid environment, right? This Microsoft Office was being used, Google's collaborations tools were being used, Slack was being used, and as you see people coming back to the office, the transition of the tools is completely different.
Yeah. So imagine all of us would love to know more about those predictions and how those trends are going. So I don't know if anybody wants access to that report.
It's available online on the Okta website.
Yeah. You mentioned that data is the lifeblood for your business. Do you have any advice for everyone on how to become more data-driven, how to get executives within the company to think data first? There's so many of us deal with executive stakeholders who are still living by spreadsheets and gut feel and not really using and trusting the data.
Yeah, that's this is, and I've learned this, and not always the easy way. Right, it's never a build it and they'll come, right? Winning hearts and minds with data is an art and a science, right? So what we've started to do, and at Okta we're super fortunate, right? I mean, data is a company goal for us. So at Okta, we measure our progress with all our data initiatives along with the 3 other company goals that we track, not only do we have a seat at the table, at Okta, we find ourselves at the head of the table, which is, I have to pinch myself that this is really, really happening. But to win hearts and minds with data, it's not a one size fits all. You have multiple dimensions. One thing which has really worked for me at prior organizations as well is to enhance the organization data literacy, right? One strategy that has worked for us is implementing not just trust with data, right? Trust with data is almost table stakes now. With data governance program, you have data trustees and data stewards, and that can help you with data definitions and certify them and have them USAA approved, but also creating transparency with data. And that has been key for us to get collaboration across our data set. As it comes to execs, at VMware, we had Pat Gelsinger, who was the CEO at that time when I was at VMware, was a huge advocate of running his business with data, having exec meetings with data. And it just follows through the organization. So you have to get that champion. You have to get that linchpin. The other strategy which has worked extremely well for me has been to build out an analytics community. Right, it's while my team, although small, and I think they're super mighty. What we do is we have an analytics community in the enterprise where we support citizen data scientists and citizen business analysts with the right data sets, with the right ecosystem, with the right innovation environment, with the right processes, with the right protocols. Right, with that, what you do is you create the power of many. Right, and that way you get away from creating shadow data organizations, shadow IT organizations, shadow data sets.
It's one community.
It's one community. So every year we do an event for the analytics community, which is now 600 people strong in Okta. And last year we did, the event was storytelling with data. Right, we were fortunate enough to have Santa Clara Fire Department come and share with us that they looked at their entire data supply chain and figured out by changing into a different pair of shoes, they can get to fires faster. Can you imagine getting 2 minutes faster to a fire is saving lives and saving property, and it's priceless. And when they presented this to the government, it was no questions asked. Right. So this year the theme for our analytics day is data is your superpower, and how do you go beyond business intelligence? How do you make sure you augment intelligence using AI and ML?
Wonderful. And you just touched on a topic that, Ramnik, I know is really near and dear to your heart. Maybe you could introduce yourself and your role at USAA, and in particular, how you are enabling citizen data science.
Very happy to be here. Thank you, Bret. Ramnik Bajaj, I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at USAA. I think most people know USAA. What you may not realize is we just hit our 100th birthday. So 2 weeks back was our 100th anniversary. And so, yes, well, I've been there for a year, but I'll take the applause anyway. But no, it's a phenomenal organization. The longevity is one thing. The USAA has been providing financial products for the last 100 years to our members. And if you think about a 100-year-old company, the core of any financial services product is either data processing or analytics. Yes, there's a lot of risk management and other aspects that come with it, but you're either doing analytics or you're doing data processing. No fishing, no manufacturing, no ships, nothing, no tangible physical product other than the data that we use to serve our members, our customers. And so being a data professional in financial services, which is what I've been doing for the last 25 years, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing for all the richness of data sets. Nobody disputes the value or the importance of data and how critical it is to have it right. There's rarely any conversation where you have to convince someone that data can be valuable because, I mean, they get it. They're underwriting, they're actuaries, they've been using data forever. Even before there was computing, they were using data. They're on the lending side. They've been doing credit analysis with data forever. That is their bread and butter job, right? Any type of risk management, it's all data analytics. And so that part is a blessing plus, of course, the richness of the data set, right? It's one thing to know somebody's intent. It's another to know where they're putting their money, or what they're doing with their money, or how they are protecting their money, and so forth. So the richness of the data set is just amazing. The curse side of it is data is a topic for banking executives because there's been trouble. Because there's been, I don't have the data to prove it, but there are way too many MRAs issued by regulators and other regulatory actions and fines and whatnot that trace back to a data issue. So it's complicated when our executives are thinking about data. They're emotionally tuned to think about all the negatives that they've had to live through. All of those significant events that cost a lot to remediate and then to sustain. So it's a highly regulated industry. There's CCPA and now CPRA and even GDPR were relatively new for at least some industries, maybe retail and others. For us, GLBA was there for the last, 2 decades, right? So we were dealing with data privacy, proper and appropriate use of data, knowing what data is being used for, and making sure it's compliant with fair lending, with FCRA, and so forth, right? So we always had that heavy regulatory hand on us. So it's challenging, and because of the length of time that many financial services industries, companies have been around, they predate data as a discipline, right? So CDO as a profession is new, but data as a discipline itself is, relatively speaking, new. If you go back, 15 years or even 20 years, it was IT, right? There was no attention paid to what is the data we are capturing. Is it consistent? Is it being captured with quality? Is it being propagated unnecessarily? Do we have too many copies of the data? All these aspects of data management, data governance, are relatively speaking new, which means for companies like ours, we have a lot of legacy of systems design, process design, and a lot of analytics and reporting that were done in silos that had no concept of data management applied to it. So it's a relatively new profession relative to IT and makes the role very challenging as well. I will get to your question. So we were just talking about deflection, right? It's like, ignore the question. Talk about what you want to talk about. So, but Bret's question, I do have in my role the charter to set the strategy, govern the data environment, build the data solutions, but also lead the AI Center of Excellence for the enterprise. And so that's, it's, I would say, relative to other data fields, it draws more attention. It's a good, shiny object. And you can get a lot of business interest into what you're trying to do. And so it's been a phenomenal story of growth for my current role and my prior roles as well, of really showing the business value with the power of AI and advanced analytics. And it's not even so much decision-making with data. That is an aspect that continues to be an important aspect. Now it's come to designing core products because we have the power of data and analytics. So I'll take an example. Our largest business is property and casualty insurance. Being able to process a claim within the same day when it's filed is a huge differentiator. It's a product on its own. You can't offer that product if you don't have data and analytics behind the scenes. And I believe we were the first to do this, but after a natural disaster, fire, flood, whatever, aerial imagery does become available. There are a few public consortia that provide aerial imagery of areas that have been hit by natural disasters. But if you need to get an army of people pouring through aerial images to see if the total loss claims are accurate, for potentially thousands of customers. It's not, you can't process that in a day. You can't turn around in a day. We were able to do that with AI applied to computer aerial imagery. Even if the entire scene was obfuscated with thick smoke, we were able to apply AI filters, do image processing to see if the property was indeed a total loss. And it's not that hard for an AI to learn an image of a total loss versus a partial loss versus a no loss, right? So, and we were able to do those claims the same day. Now think about it from the customer's perspective, right? They just lost their home to a natural disaster. Calling your insurance company and getting the check the same day, that's huge. That's a product we enable with the power of data and AI. And more recently, we are doing mileage-based insurance as well as behavioral-based insurance. All of that is data analytics at scale.
So to get that scale, you need a lot more people who are data savvy, creating products built on data. So how are you speeding access to the right data, knowing that those silos that existed before limit those data products?
Yeah.
So how do you get it to more people's hands faster?
Absolutely. I think there was an earlier session today with Data Marketplace, and we heard Eli Lilly's experience with, first of all, when any of us in our day jobs are thinking about trying to be either data-driven or innovating with data, the question comes, what is the data we have, right? Do we have this type of data? Where do we have it, right? So being able to query that, being able to go on a website and just search for it and see what the company has, that's kind of a foundational element. It sounds very trivial when you say it, but none of us have had that, right? And it doesn't matter physically where the data is, because we can't physically collect all the data of the company and put it in one place. But regardless of where it physically is, being able to know that it exists, then being able to understand what that data is, right? I often say data quality is an issue. The bigger issue is metadata quality, because without good, precise definitions, chances are you're not capturing the data correctly, let alone storing it or using it correctly. So having the right metadata to understand the data. And then one thing we are doing is get immediate access to that data for experimentation. So walled garden, you can't take the data out. It's tokenized or obfuscated for sensitive data. It's a sample. It's not the full data set, but you get it like that. And now if you have that data in front of you and you have layered on top of that exact data set the workbench to do your analytics, to start experimenting with it, that's what then fuels the culture of being data-driven, because there's no friction in this, right? There's no, I have to wait for 3 days for the data steward to approve my access. You don't have to be guessing and calling friends to find out what data they might have. It's all in front of you. And that's something, we've had a marketplace for a while. We are now enhancing that with a lot more AI-based search and also adding to it a knowledge graph so that the metadata is not English language text. It's actually encoded into a knowledge graph, which makes it that much more powerful to understand the data, the correlations, and what you could use it for.
Yeah. Is there anything you're doing from a technology perspective to make it easier to bring in external data and to manage all this data and to give it that sort of transparency and observability? And
yeah, I think for us on the insurance side, especially external data sets is part of that lifeblood, right, that Anoop talked about. We have to complement everything we do with those external data sets. Much like other financial services institutions, the history is all siloed acquisition, siloed repositorying. If at all, the data might bleed out, it's in breach of contract, right? So it's a bad thing if that same data set shows up in another business, because you were not, by contract, you were supposed to use it for just that business. So we are flipping that equation, acquire external data sets at the enterprise level, make them available with the right chargeback models and so forth to all of our businesses, to have, again, them external data sets be equal citizens in the data catalogs and marketplace so that you can discover what data we have already purchased and is available for use, and then provide that same sample-based access instantaneously.
Well, thank you. So just a question actually for the audience. As you're listening to this and thinking, well, I think one of the questions that comes up very often is, how can the information that Okta knows, that Anoop knows, that Ramnik knows, that you'll hear about from Warren, how does that information help other industries and help other businesses? I think all of us are aspiring to create more data products, whether it's a product to serve our customers directly or data as a product for other markets. So if you think of some provocative questions around those topics, it touches on the sensitivity of proper use of data, but also unlocking the value of the things that each of us uniquely knows about the world we live in, businesses and our industries, and how it might help other industries and other companies. So while we're teeing that up, any last advice or guidance for people, Ramnik, as they're going through their own data journey, becoming data-driven, using this advanced analytics and data science and enabling citizen data scientists, what advice do you have?
I think the challenge many of us face is getting investments into the data infrastructure is an uphill task for all of us. These are, I call it, there's 10% inspiration, but 90% of what we do is perspiration, right? It's core hard work. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of down at the detail level. When I first said that, somebody said, don't make us sound like laborers. We are artisans. So I said, fine, artisans. We are
hardworking artisans.
Hardworking artisans. There's an art to what we do, but there's a lot of volume to what we do. So great, let's be artisans. So, but getting that ROI kind of committed is an uphill task for all of us. So what I've found useful is to have enough of a foundational architecture and vision in place that has been well socialized, everyone accepts, but execute it based on what business cases and what product innovation items or what reporting needs or what analytic needs arise. So when you implement that use case, you build out a sliver of your architectural vision. And then when the next one arises, you build out another sliver. And over the course of time, which could be multiple years, you're building out more and more of your data foundation and data infrastructure. I think any attempt to create a singular data environment for the whole company, getting all data sets, they just tend to cause investment fatigue with the executives. And even though the vision might be very solid and the payback will be huge on the back end of it, difficult to do that in a business environment.
It's really great advice. I hear this all the time. Pre-pandemic, there was a lot more of those big bang, giant projects, and since then, a lot more agile build out against a strategy where people have a vision and strategy, build it out through high value projects over time, and then it becomes the default and you can get rid of legacy. That kind of pattern actually does lead into, Warren, to a bit introduction with you. If you could tell more people about your role, obviously people know Best Buy, but your role at Best Buy, and in particular how you're balancing modernization, the stuff we just talked about, with the democratization of data.
Sure, thank you. Warren Hearnes, I am Chief Data Scientist for Best Buy. I've been there about 6 months now. So relatively new to the company, but we are elevating the use of data to make better decisions because as we know, the retail landscape is changing. You know, we have to go from being pure in stores to fighting the online, to combining to omni-channel, knowing more about the customer, trying to do things more efficiently with labor and pricing and supply chain, any number of things. So that is my focus at Best Buy. It encompasses all of the algorithms that we use to support the customer, to support the stores, support supply chain, and things like that. As I said, I've been there about 6 months. I am in Atlanta, and I've been in Atlanta for 30 years. I went to Georgia Tech for my master's and PhD. Did some reinforcement learning research back in the early 90s. So I may talk a few examples about Basically, I've given a talk on everything I ever needed to know I learned from reinforcement learning. It's basically the adapt and be agile, that type of stuff. But have worked at a number of different companies. The great thing about the perspective as either a chief data scientist or as you all in the chief data officer roles is that we can go from into many different industries. So my first role was a factory down in Atlanta with Lucent Technologies, then to UPS, then to Home Depot, and then into fintech advertising with a small company, Cardlytics, and now with the Best Buy.
Yeah, that's a really critical pattern also that we see. Chief data officers change industries, but they don't leave data. So data has gravity and it draws us all in, but the lessons learned are useful across industry.
Well, I think to you, I didn't get to the question, but,
Oh, yeah.
but we are, at Best Buy, we're in this migration, and I don't know, show of hands, how many people are either currently or have done a migration from legacy to the cloud? I hope we're not the only one. All right, so we are in the midst of that. And what we have is, my goal for my team as both users / consumers of the data, but we also produce data. We and the decision science team are sort of the experts in the company on the value of the data. The data engineers are the ones that come up with the best way to put that into the cloud. And we're trying to make that trade-off, and I'm sure you all have gone through it before, is let's not just do a basic lift and shift and put all of our mistakes in the decades-old legacy systems into the cloud. But at the same time, it can't take so long that you are basically running two diverging paths where a data scientist might say, well, I'd love to do this in GCP, but GCP doesn't have this semantic layer built yet. So now I have to do either a pretty crazy workaround to get it up there, or I have to go back and do things with legacy systems, because that's where we are. We're in the middle of that right now. And my goal is for what I call frictionless data science, where my team can hear a question and not worry as much about where the data is coming from and is it the right, is it refreshed in the right way, and things like that. I want us to be able to use this neural network up here, which is the best one that my data scientists have, and be able to look at it, know that it's right, and to build and in an agile way products that help either tactically help Best Buy make better decisions, and maybe let the call centers make faster repair decisions, or tell us what parts we need to send out to fix someone's washer or dryer, or at a more strategic level, let the executive team make these decisions less gut and more data-driven, because that's the goal for Corey Berry, our CEO, is that this is a top five priority to elevate the use of data in the decision-making over the next couple of years. So that's why we're here.
Yep. You know, most business leaders who got to very successful positions did it over 30 years using gut feel. And it's very hard for them to let go of that gut feel. And also they haven't built up the muscle memory of how to use data properly, how to ask for forecasts, how to predict and prescribe. So it is a huge culture change. How are you, what do you see as different in governance and organization and skills in order to get to a data-driven leadership team?
It's a great point about all of your executives are going to say, I want to be more data-driven. I mean, that's...
How could you not want to be?
Yeah, yeah. So where the rubber meets the road is when, to your point, they've gotten to where they're at by making less data-driven and more gut decisions, and they've been successful. And where they're going to start to question things is when your data-driven decision goes against some of their gut decisions, and that's a tricky balancing act for a data science team. And one of the ways that we do that with our rapid prototyping approach is that we put something in front of the either the directors or the VPs or the executives periodically, and we say, let's just say it's a model about labor planning, and then we ask, okay, this isn't the final decision, but if you change this piece of data, this input, and it goes up, does the model do what you think it should do? So we're trying to get buy-in on does the system work? Because either if we're making a decision and it goes against their gut feel, either they're right and we're wrong, our model is too simplistic and it doesn't take something into account, or they're going to learn something about an edge case that they didn't know about. So
I think this was really true during the pandemic, where a lot of the gut feel models people had about supply and demand and people's behavior and stuff, especially in consumer businesses, it just was no longer valid. People were not behaving the way they used to because everything changed in the world. And I heard from companies who were using more what you described, scenario analysis, sensitivity analysis, looking for if this one thing changes, what is likely to occur? Much more of a forecasted view rather than a gut feel. We know if you raise the price 5 cents, this might happen, but during a pandemic, that wasn't true anymore. It wasn't price sensitivity. It was the fact that people weren't leaving their homes. It changed everything.
And I think that's, so as a data science leader, you need to come up with these scenarios and say, if, it's no different than regular science, if what my hypotheses are true, then these things will happen. If I see something that is different than that, let me go back and question it. Back before we had all used Waze and Maps, Google Maps to get places, we had to actually look at a map, and the way that my dad taught me was pick out something that says, if we see this, we went too far, we missed a turn. And so I think that's, you need to do that with your data science projects as well, is that pick out some things that say, this supports my conclusions and this doesn't, so that you aren't overly focused on being right. Because as a data scientist, you don't want to just focus on what you thought and prove that you were right. You want to do the right thing for the business.
The other thing, and I also learned this from my dad, who was really good with maps. He never got lost. But he always said to leave extra time, which we don't do anymore with maps, with Google Maps and Waze. We leave no extra buffer because we don't need to. It's predicted when we're going to arrive, and it's pretty close. So you had to leave an extra buffer, and I had to learn how to fold maps. But that map folding skill is gone, and we don't leave the buffer anymore. And that's also true in business. The buffers are thinner all the time. There's no room for error. So having predictive models helps you. And the skill sets that were useful before, like folding maps, are not the same skill sets you need to navigate with Waze. So reskilling and training is essential.
That's right. For our data science team, if we're going to be competitive to attract and retain talent, then we're not going to be paying the highest salary. But what we can do is that we can give people some really cool problems to work on, give them some autonomy to do that and the right platform. And I'm also, maybe the vendors in the room may not like to hear this, but I'm relatively tool agnostic. I don't like my team to go chasing the latest and greatest tool. I want them to. I would rather have us standardize on a tool and use that for a number of years, realizing that tool may not have every feature that we want, but that I can take someone from the pricing team and someone from the marketing team and switch them, and they're not using completely different tools. But the other thing that we are doing that is getting a lot of value, and I'm sure that you all do it as well, is we have dedicated training, external and internal, and we let our team have at least a day and a half per month to upskill things that they talk about with their manager, to say it's going to help Best Buy, it's going to help them, and it feels, it's the culture of learning something new, and it's the culture of working on really cool problems that are going to allow us to keep some talent that would otherwise get plucked away to another team.
Yeah. So last question for you is what's next in your journey for Best Buy, And what advice do you have everyone as you're trying to work on democratizing data and elevating the role of data science?
Yeah, so our goal right now is prior to me coming, there was about a year's worth of transition of a lot of siloed teams coming into a center of excellence. So the immediate goals are to provide stability and to get that frictionless data science, get the data up in GCP, allow us to do the things that we need to do to show the executives and to support our CEO with this Elevate data strategy. And then from that point, it's a combination of run the business, but also some foundational NLP, computer vision, other types of cool things that we can use to help our call centers, to help things that are going on in and around the stores, and doing some work with universities, MIT, Georgia Tech down in Atlanta, and a few others. But the vision is to get some quick wins right now, and then to establish that foundation to do some really cool things in the future.
Very good. I think what you heard from each of these three speakers across three different industries and segments is very common thoughts around the democratization of data, the importance of governance, the soft skills in both selling projects as well as building hearts and minds of people, becoming data-driven. These are all the challenges you hear from chief data officers almost everywhere. So I'd like to turn it over to you guys for questions. We have ability to do live questions in the room. There's some mics here if you just want to raise your hand and grab a mic. We've also had a few questions come in as well online, but there we go. One first live question. Someone always has to break the ice.
One question that I think about it is, so we're all aware of type 1 error and type 2 error, false positives, false negatives, rejecting no, it's not true. The concern when I hear, the thing that makes me nervous, I'll put it that way, the thing that makes me nervous, my palms get sweaty when I hear a citizen data scientist, is really type 3 error, which is like using all the right statistical techniques, all the right methodologies to fundamentally ask the wrong question or attempt to answer the wrong question. As you think about trying to scale out this function, making data accessible, tooling, et cetera, how do you ensure that the right questions are being asked and that you're not driving the business very confidently now in absolutely the wrong direction?
Well, I'll say how we did it at my last company at Cardlytics in Atlanta is we were having to say, because our data science team was focused on some really high priority things. And we were having to say no to too many of the one-offs and other types of projects. So we got some software that did auto ML, but we allowed everyone in the company to have ideas and test models and do things like that, but nothing could be deployed until it came through someone on the data science team. And the great thing about some of these auto ML tools is that since it's standardized, as I said earlier, standardization is a great efficiency improvement, is that the data science team, the experts could look at that at a standard set of reports and ask the business questions, but also evaluate each of the models. And so there was this extra layer of citizen data science, but it wasn't, you couldn't just throw something into the API and let everyone in the company use it without some type of supervision. So it allowed us to get to that long tail of some of these data science projects that probably wouldn't have gotten done otherwise, but it justified the expense.
Yeah. You guys want to add to that?
Yeah, with data scientists, you also have, please be careful when you try this at home, right? I mean, with business analysis, you can knock yourself out. So one of the things which we've done is, look at the currency of data, right? And always have current quarter -1, current quarter -2 when you have the citizen data scientists working on the data science problems. It's a fine line between policing people and not letting them be hammers in search of a nail, right? So the idea is to give them data sets, but also have what Warren mentioned, supervision, a light supervision, because what you do is when you move models from innovation to production, that's when they go through the auspices of the centralized data team, which talk about the problem they're trying to solve, whether it's a causation, correlation, or this model typically is not what we'd like to get into production. And that is the way you try to have the grassroots well of data science, but also govern it, so to speak.
Yeah, and for us in financial services, model risk management is kind of a mature function at this point. So there's almost a built-in checkpoint, right? Even if it doesn't come to the enterprise teams, it's going to have to go through model risk management. I think on day-to-day decision making, it's part of that culture of don't have your decision and then seek data to prove it. But on the flip side, don't have data guide you against your intuition entirely, right? So there is that judgment loop in between to what the data is telling you and what your gut is telling you and where you strike that balance.
Yeah, I'll often see people focusing on sort of circles of trust, and anything that gets published for really larger use is going through a certified team. Other people might be trained, but managing it themselves, and then there's end users. But I think the risk of locking it down too much is you lose the people who are closest to customers, the people closest to business, who have things they want to know. They may not be the best data scientists, but they're really close to the business. And so you want to have them innovating, but also maintain protection and trust. It's a tricky balance to do, but most companies I see are focusing on these federated models with the data science as close to the business decisions as possible with the support of central teams who can certify. What other questions do we have in the room? Anyone brave enough to get up to a microphone? If not, fortunately, the app helps us. So there was one question that's not really a question. It said, why would someone leave data? I'm not really sure what that means. I don't know if it's a reference to someone saying they left data, but because I said that nobody ever leaves data, that's why. We do love this space, and I think we're fortunate enough to have lived long enough where data and cloud and AI have all matured to a point where we can have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, and I won't take credit for this, but I did read a book recently, Yuval Harari, Homo Deus, where one of the headlines chapters is "Data is the new God." So that's why we don't leave data.
There you go.
We found our religion.
We don't want to anger God. Someone asked, they said the question, there's a bill being proposed, the Fourth Amendment is not for sale, that addresses the sale of data, general privacy and data issues, selling data. It's a bipartisan bill. I don't have the whole question here. But the point is, where do you think regulations are going in the sense of privacy? Will it enable these data products and greater data use, or is it going to prevent innovation?
Yeah, let me start that since a lot of that falls on us in financial services. First off, having a federal level privacy regulation, we are very welcoming of that. As you can imagine, California had one a few years back besides EU that preceded California. And then there were 17 different states trying to get their own privacy laws enacted. Having a federal level regulation against having 50 different state level regulations, very welcoming of that. Gives us all clarity, we can consistently implement it, we can all turn out better for it. The implications of that, I think of it as sale of data in return of value or tangible and intangible value. Leave that aside for a second. If one of our members calls us at USAA, they're not calling the bank, they're not calling the life company, they're not calling the member enrollment team, they're calling USAA. They expect us to know what they've already done with us, what documents they've already provided to us, what their last interaction was, why they might be calling us. They're thrilled if we can predict why they're calling us and we already have addressed or know how to address what they're calling for. I would be surprised if anything in the federal regulations prevents us from delighting our customers in that way. Of course, being respectful of what opt-outs or constraints they would want to pose on us. So we always provide that ability for customers, and this is not unique to USA, but across the industry, of saying, do not share my data with affiliates. Do not share my product information, even within your own organization as affiliates. So within bounds of that, And by the way, the uptake of those types of opt-outs are pretty low, right? Because I don't think, once you trust a company, you trust them with your checking account and your credit card. There isn't that much of a leap of faith to say, well, bank account, you can do it, but credit cards, oh my God, no, I wouldn't want that. So I think it works out in our favor to have good, clear regulation.
We have one last question, and leave it to a data audience to be this precise. But they said
There's actually a number of online.
Oh, I saw one more online. So if we have more, we can take them.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. 3 votes were, what keeps you up at night as a data leader?
I didn't see that one.
So for me, I'll start and I'll hand it off to Anoop. But look, I think there is no boundary to data. So I used to say, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, you're either generating data or using data, usually both. Now I say, even when you're sleeping, your watch is capturing all the signals, you're still generating data, right? So everything we do, every action, every interaction we have with our customers, every internal action, there's data being created, being used. And for me as a CDO, drawing the boundary to say, this is me, but this is somebody else, or this is another group's mandate, that's incredibly difficult. And so most discussions, especially the challenging ones, have the word data in them. We had a data issue. Well, what was the issue? That's not really a data issue. I mean, a process broke down. That led to bad data. The symptom was the bad data, but it was a process breakdown. So I would say that's the thing that keeps me up is how do I draw that boundary in a way that doesn't feel disingenuous, at the same time it's something that I can truly control.
Sure. Is there one of you two want to talk?
Yeah, so Ramnik, this is exactly what, is we all deal with, there's just so much data. While we want to foster innovation and want everybody to be data-driven in the company, at the same time, we also want things to happen in a secure and ethical fashion. There's an alphabet soup of regulations out there, and I couldn't agree with you more that we'd love a federal mandate on data privacy and regulation so that we can all level set the playing field. Right now, depending on the time of the day and the phase of the moon, this can change, right? So while we are fostering innovation and inspiring people to be data driven, how do we make sure we are always doing it in a secure and ethical fashion is something which is top of mind for me.
Sure. There were a couple other questions. These are from the remote audience, but let's make sure we get the present audience. Any other questions here? You got a question here?
Great session. So my question is that we have all the companies will always have the current maturity level and then the end state. But what is that end state, not just for your company, but as a data leader, like for the industry in general, what is the ideal state for us in terms of people, process, technology to become truly data driven? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there are 10 things that I think of. Just kidding. Look, I think target state for us is a constantly evolving concept. We think of a 3-year target state, but we revise it every year. Why? Because we expect the business, the industry, the technology, even data science to constantly be evolving, and therefore require us to chase that target state all the time. Where we sit today, I would say a target state is a friction-free data environment that's unified. You can see the data with the right permissions and governance across the entire company, across the customer's whole set of interactions, with an integrated analytic and data science workbench attached directly to it. Enough data literacy in the company so people understand what they are doing or what they are getting. For us to publish a report saying with 95% confidence level, we think we are within 2 sigmas of whatever result, that should make sense to the audience, right? So enough data literacy that we can meaningfully use whatever insights we are drawing, and very personal, no regulatory issues. That would be a good target.
Yeah, I think for us, it's basically knowing that we're always going to be improving models and coming up with new things. It's putting in place the right either platform or processes that allow us to make incremental changes to whatever systems that we have at Best Buy, rather than saying, hey, we've got this great new data product or model, but we can't implement it until 6, 12, 18 months from now when we do this major change. We're trying to just get things behind APIs so they can be ingested by different parts of the organization.
Thank you. Great panel. Actually learned a lot, actually, and definitely I'll be using Okta's report.
Thank you.
And this question is for Ramnik. You mentioned knowledge graphs that you have implemented. Can you share some of the use cases that you could not able to do otherwise?
Yeah, so still very much in incubation phase. There are 4 concrete use cases that we've come out with so far. I think the one where I at least see most value is where we have unrecognized correlations between member behavior across the businesses. And for us to be able to correlate that, generally when one of our members, let's say, takes out a mortgage loan, their insurance activity tends to be along the lines of various either an auto loan gets taken out or an auto policy gets taken out or a few other things happen. Those correlations, and we did that as a knowledge graph on just our channel interaction data, right? What events happened across all of our channels. That's one where I see immediate value from the ones we've implemented so far. My point on the metadata side, though, is I think that being able to understand all of these attributes of data that we have in the context of the overall knowledge graph of all of the data attributes that we haven't even thought of our metadata dictionaries that way, right? We've always thought of, let's define the loan amount and let's define the product. But now connecting all of those attributes and entities into a knowledge graph, I think will really make the task of finding data that's useful for the question you're trying to answer a whole lot easier. And that's not one of the 4 we've implemented so far, but that's the one on the metadata side. At least my goal is to integrate that into our marketplace environment. So when you do a query, you might search for card transaction date. You might be surprised to see all of the other entities and attributes that are closely linked to that you would want to look at for your query.
Any other questions in the room?
Thank you for the panel. It was great. So for me, it's most about the predictive models. So there is a big shift between, before the pandemic and after the pandemic. So I just wonder, how have you dealt with the changes that customers are making, and how are you adapting predictive models? Or how was before the pandemic and after the pandemic for all your data analysis or whatever you're doing?
Sure. So I wasn't with Best Buy before the pandemic, but I will talk in general about some of the things that we ran into at my previous company, because what the previous company did is ingested about half of the card swipes, debit and credit card swipes in the United States, and gave you targeted offers of like, get 10% cash back on your next Starbucks transaction. And to your point, what COVID did is basically change history. And the old statistical models and the new machine learning models, they started to fail because they rely on 1, 2, 3, 4 years worth of data. And it was interesting because the more data that you knew, for instance, if a Starbucks had a drive-through, then you could see that their sales went up through these bank statements. But if a Starbucks didn't have a drive-through, obviously during COVID, it didn't. So part of this was, can you get more data to find out who can do well and who can't? And then, and maybe this isn't a data science approach, but the system got less accurate. But what we had to do is bring in the people that were the business users, the stakeholders, and say, look, we've got this online retailer that has this absolutely crazy uptick, and then it goes down, and it's starting to go back up. One algorithm says it's going to go up, one algorithm says it's going to go down, and one algorithm says it's going to stay level. Which one do you want to go with? And just by bringing those people into it, and them seeing that there's a lot more to data science than, the hype is that you give a computer some data and it will tell you the right answer. But that's, with things like this, that's not correct. So we had to get very much more tightly coupled with the end users and explain to them, look, this is not an easy decision now. So even with things like Best Buy, we don't know. It's not just COVID. It's stimulus checks that happened last year. There are different things that happen, and the trade-off is how much time do you want to spend trying to figure out what each one of those events does versus do scenarios and say, what if we're going into a recession? What if we get another stimulus check? What if? But those decisions become less gut and more, what is the risk? But it's not entirely relying on the algorithms.
This was an incredible panel led by an incredible questioner. I'm totally impressed. Are you? Thank you so much. All right, so this ends this session, and we've got a couple more before the last and final session.